I'm going to read a little part from the new book, which is called The Damned, which is about fraternal twins, Danny and Ashley Orchard, who both die on their 16th birthdays under mysterious circumstances. Danny returns to life. Ashley, his not at all nice sister, does not. And Ashley's not happy about that, and haunts Danny for all of his adult life until he falls in love with a single mother who has a son, and he has his first chance at forming a family and experiencing companionship and love, and Ashley likes that even less, and comes back to claim all of them for herself, which requires Danny to die a second time to prevent her from doing that. So in this, but in this scene, I just want to give you just introduce you very quickly to Ashley and how she works and how bad she actually is. It only got worse after Mom died. Within days of our father coming home from work to find her in the bathtub, drunk and drowned, the very afternoon that followed the morning of our mother's funeral, Ash asked if I would come to the house of the boy she was seeing at the time, Brendan Oliver, and walk her home. It was an odd request on several fronts, considering we'd stood by a hole in the ground of Woodlawn Cemetery and watched our mother be lowered into it just 2 hours earlier. But this was Ash, free of grief, of boundaries. It was all she could do to keep the trembly-cheeked, near-tears look fixed to her face at the graveside as long as she did, before bursting out of the rented limo and running into the house to call Brendan and see if he was around and wanted to see her. He was. He did. "Could you come by Brendan's later, Danny? I need to talk to you about something," Ash said, before she swiped her lips with strawberry gloss and headed out the door. It wasn't a request, and I knew it wasn't something she wanted to talk to me about, but something she wanted to show me. I made it to the Oliver house on Derby Avenue shortly after 5 and tried the front doorbell, though I figured there was little chance of anyone answering. At 17, Brendan was even older than the other older boys Ash was moving between, a wide-jawed senior on the basketball team known for his success with girls. He was the sort of aggressive, taunting, self-certain kid who went unquestioned in his actions, a towering collection of physical gifts set to play for Ohio the next year, not so much above the law, but in our world, the law itself. All of this, along with the absence of his parents' car in the driveway, meant that he probably had Ash to himself somewhere inside. He would be murmuring his commands in one of the curtained rooms. He would ignore the doorbell until he was through. It made me wonder what Ash wanted me here for. And as I thought about that, in an instant, the first real grief of the day arrived. The realization that my mother, who was gone forever, came over me in a blanket that left me gasping and blind, reaching for the porch railing and blinking out at the street until its trees and awnings returned to focus. And when they did, I glanced back at the Oliver's door to see the hall light behind the pane of decorative glass dim and brighten. A sound, too, the low hum of machinery. Ash had said something about Brendan's dad having a workshop in the garage behind their house. Even as I started up the driveway toward it, I was thinking, if I know there's a workshop back here, she wanted me to know it. The conclusion that followed, if I'm going to look through the window, she wants me to, didn't stop me from lifting my nose over the splintered window frame to peer inside. At first it seemed like they were dancing, wrapped close and swaying to a slow song I couldn't hear, the side of Ash's face held against his chest and Brendan folded over her like a question mark. But it wasn't a dance. His shirt was off, for one thing, and their movements were a single-bodied negotiation. He trying to get her to the floor, where his Dondero high hoodie lay as a makeshift bedsheet, and she keeping him up, nuzzling her cheek against his ribs, directing his lips down to hers with a hand. Without turning her head, Ash glanced over to the window, found me. She related a couple of facts through her eyes alone. The first was that she'd been waiting for me to get there, had worked to situate herself and Brendan where they were at that moment, and now, finally, she could begin. The second was that the standing bandsaw behind Ash was on. It looked so sharp, like teeth. I could hear her voice, her very words from moments ago, like the trace of an echo in the air. She would have gasped after speaking them so that he could feel the heat of her breath. Mock scared, mock aroused, but the excitement real. "Could you turn it on, Brendan?" I watched him kiss her as she arched to meet him, her eyes closed, his wide as an owl's bearing down on something small and doomed in the grass. Eyes that watched as Ash took his hand in hers and guided it toward the smooth table of the bandsaw, the blade a steady blur of motion. It happened fast, though not that fast. There was time for Brendan to see what was about to take place and stop it before it did. He could have pulled his hand away, jumped back from her touch, demanded to know what the hell she thought she was doing. Instead, he watched as I did as Ash placed his hand on the table and slid his blade fingers into the spinning saw's gray teeth. If he screamed, I don't remember the sound of it. What I remember before running down the driveway to the street, before I voiced a scream of my own, was Ash opening her eyes, making sure that I saw. What was important for me to see wasn't the violence, the seductive ease with which the bandsaw parted two of Brendan Oliver's fingers from the rest of him, or the neat jet of blood that left what could have been an attempt at a Valentine's heart on the plank wall, but how she'd made him do it to himself. He hadn't fought her, hadn't protested. He'd been as interested in seeing what she had planned for him as I was. And it would only be later, after telling his parents it was an accident, and the revocation of his invitation to play for Ohio, and the new, hollow resignation that haunted his face whenever I saw him, usually alone, on the streets of Royal Oak over the years afterward, that he realized the beautiful girl in his father's workshop hadn't stolen a part of him, but the whole thing. Thank you.